Welcome to the Fabric of America, the podcast that celebrates small businesses and the remarkable stories that weave our communities together. We're your hosts, Melissa Otto
and Matt Banover.
Matt is a fashion designer passionate about storytelling through style.
And Melissa is a seamstress on a mission to make sewing cool again and inspire the next generation. We sit down with small business owners, artisans, and dreamers to uncover the stories behind their brand, what inspires them, challenges them, and keeps them creating.
Because we believe that behind every idea, every design, every stitch, there's a story worth sharing. So grab a drink from your favorite local shop and join us as we weave together conversations about passion, perseverance, and the power of small business.
Bill, I can't believe this. This is wild. This is just a perfect example of, online community just
coming together
and just finding each other. Like,
absolutely.
I don't even know how we came to be. I'm pretty sure Jake was somehow involved. But it's only recently that you and I have started to kind of connect more in like DMs and talking to each other. But so run us back. Take us to the beginning.
Tell everybody who you are. Let the listener know.
So Bill Amos is my name, and I founded a company called NW Alpine back in 2010. So we're a manufacturer of technical apparel, outdoor apparel that's mostly oriented towards like climbing and backcountry skiing and alpine sports sort of stuff. So that's kind of like where my background is, like professionally, not in like apparel or manufacturing or anything like that. I came to it, I think like a lot of people do through the sports that I did. So I was a big climber, did a lot of ice climbing, mixed climbing, alpine climbing all over the world. And, obviously like that requires a certain kind of apparel that is very kind of purpose built and specific for those things. So my goal, I kind of, when I was doing a lot of climbing in my 20s, was kind of unhappy with a lot of the apparel that was available from larger companies that have a climbing heritage. So like Patagonias and the North Faces and those guys. Like obviously the market for lifestyle apparel is much bigger than it is for people that actually go out and do stuff. So
Yeah.
I wanted to make apparel that was purpose built for the activities that we were doing. And then my goal since 2010 has always been to make it in the US. So that kind of started me on the path that we've been on for the last 15 years. And it's been an interesting one, that is for
I
sure.
bet.
Yeah.
Insane.
What got you into climbing? Like, where have you always been into climbing? Like, where does that passion come from?
Yeah, I was always into outdoor stuff. I grew up outside of Chicago, which is not like a place that you think of for outdoor sports. But I did, I was pretty involved with Boy Scouts when I was young, and so we used to go camping all the time, and that's kind of how I started climbing and skiing and all that. And I kind of really like got into it through skiing initially. So I raced in high school in the Midwest and,
Oh, wow.
left to go to Colorado as soon as I possibly could, to go to college. And that kind of, that's where I really started climbing and getting into like ice climbing and that sort of stuff. And,
What, like free
yeah.
solo, just raging
Oh,
out.
yeah. My husband and I have watched every single climbing documentary series that there is. Like, it's absurd. And every time, like, then the new one comes out, the next one comes out, it's like, don't you want to watch this? I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
I absolutely do. It's infectious. It really is. It's pretty funny. Um,
Yeah, there's been some good ones for sure.
when you were first like, okay, there's something missing in the gear that I'm using. I have this wild idea to basically make it better. I'm going to start a company. what does step one look like for you as someone who didn't come from a fashion background?
Yeah. So I had no idea where to start and really like, Portland is obviously an apparel town. Nike's there and Adidas North America and a ton of other brands in the athletic and outdoor space. So I knew were people around that knew what they were doing. And so I actually, because it was 2010, I posted a post on Craigslist looking for people that could help me and had a couple of really weird meetings before I finally met a lady that knew what she was doing and had worked for a women's athletic apparel company and kind of got me on the right track. Like, we got type packs made for styles and then she actually found this little tiny factory in Portland that, I had no idea existed. And so she got me set up with them and we worked on the first production runs. There and I made, our first product was a pair of soft shell pants that we still have an iteration of in the line. And,
So
I
cool.
think we made 100 pairs and I was like, okay, well, either we'll sell these or I'll have climbing pants forever. And that's okay.
Nice.
Who you
So yeah, we
selling
started selling and then just took off from there.
who are you selling to? Are you selling to friends, other climbers? Do you just pull up on the outside of a mountain and open up the trunk and like who where do you get a customer base?
Yeah. So I mean, I was pretty lucky because I had a lot of friends that were really good or are really good climbers. So they like took our gear to, Pakistan and to Alaska and did all these first ascents and stuff in it. So that got us a lot of attention in the beginning. And then we really like kind of launched it first. There was a forum called cascadeclimbers.com that was like a really popular when forums were still a thing and that during that time so we got a lot of our first sales from that as well. But for me it was kind of not easy, obviously, but easier because there's like definitely a defined niche for who could benefit from wearing our stuff, and it's not like we're trying to go after this broad base of people and convince them to wear our lifestyle product. I don't know, like
Yeah.
fashion, like the whole fashion part of apparel is like very scary to me. I don't know.
It's a
Really?
big ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big ocean. It's pretty crazy. When you were first getting started, like I'm sure now R&D looks a little different than it did then. Were you just like letting your friends go at it in these pants and like, "Hey, give me the feedback. What can we do better?" and kind of pivoting along the way?
Yep. Yeah, yep, that's exactly it. Like, it's so good to find. It's so hard to get like real good feedback about products. Even people that like are, even if you're like the greatest climber ever, like it does not mean that you're good at giving giving feedback
Sure.
on products. So, finding one or two people that are really awesome and can articulate like what's wrong with something or how it could be improved, like, yeah, that's super important. So a lot of it was straight like, we didn't have money to do any like lab testing or, anything like that. So everything is just like make samples, send it, take it out, and hopefully it doesn't,
Doesn't
blow
rip
up.
along the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I couldn't even imagine, because one thing the factories that I use all have like block patterns. There's a launching pad for where to go
Yeah.
there. I can't even fathom just creating something out of thin air, but also something that needs to perform. And it sounds like in 20 years there will be a great movie made about Northwest Alpine, and I'm sure Matt Damon will play you, and there'll be like some sick montage where you're like making them out of this material and then they
Mhm.
rip and make them out of this material and they rip. But I I'm interested in two things. One being the products that you choose to make. Like since you are starting from a blank canvas, how do you know where to stop? Have you made something that was okay? We have no business making that, like an umbrella or something, but then segueing, and you can say this could be the second part of the question, making that in America. How easy it could have been for you to take advantage of the de minimis loophole and sample things from factories all over the world. You're, I mean, you probably could have had a much different trajectory had you gone that route. I need pants, I need tops, I need jackets, send them to a bunch of Indonesian and Chinese factories, versus trying it out on your friends, making things here and figuring out what your line looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think I never even thought of that as an option of like working, doing stuff overseas. It's never like just because I wasn't interested in it.
Oh,
Like,
really?
I love
um,
that.
Yeah.
and I think like part of I was thinking about this over the weekend. Part of I think the appeal to me is that like I like doing really difficult things. And climbing definitely alpine climbing falls into that. And I think like probably the hardest like business you can be in America in 2025 is making textile products. Like I don't think there's another
Literally.
literally like
There's the
because it
soundbite.
Right.
yeah.
Literally the hardest.
And and there's something that is appealing about that to me. And um, I think I through my experience both on the brand side and then, I started our factory in 2014 as a separate company. And then I don't need to go through the whole story, but basically we ended up in shutting down at the end of 2022. Partly that was because we got ended up during COVID, transitioning to do a lot of PPE production. So we had contracts for hospital gowns and masks and that sort of stuff. And then, like a lot of other domestic folks that got into that, we just got wiped out as soon as the imports came back, which was
Yeah.
super big bummer.
Yeah,
So,
right.
and we had a pretty decent sized factory at the height. We had about 75 operators, and
Wow.
we were doing a lot of production. So, um, yeah, so I've kind of had that like experience. Sorry, I think I got off track on the question, but
No, you're good.
experience from, you know, from both the brand side and then being the actual manufacturer and learning how to efficiently run production and do all that sort of stuff.
That's
And
one.
how has that like what changes have you seen both like in the greater like society industry like putting pressure or parameters on you as a business, but also what changes have you had to like implement as the years have gone by like to help make production more streamlined or get the right people in the right places, just as some examples, like what are some of the big changes over the last 15 years?
Oh man, that's a good question. I feel like one of the problems that the whole industry has is that it's so fractured. And like so many people don't know, like brands don't know that factories exist. Factories don't work with like textile mills. All this, like it's like everybody is all over the place. And there's still like handwritten invoices, and there's still like I'm sure you've experienced all of this, lack of kind of technology, and
Yep.
which makes total sense because this industry has been abandoned essentially, to the kind of whims of globalization. And there isn't margin for these factories to reinvest in new equipment and new and train and develop new processes and all of that. So I think they're still like to me it feels like it's still kind of like stalled a little bit. But again, it's like uh, in terms of like developing and modernizing and whatever, because the money is not there, because the demand's not there, because there aren't big orders coming through. And I think that will change. and hopefully is currently changing right now. But I think like I look at these factories that are still around and go back to this idea that like being competitive in an industry where your competitors pay their employees $75 a month and still be able to stay in business in 2025 is like the most impressive thing in the entire world.
Yeah.
Um, because it's it's almost like you're not meant to succeed
Yeah.
in this
The
economy.
cards are all stacked against you for sure from the get-go.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but that gives me like this, like, this hope because the industry is actually it's actually big. Like our, the apparel and textile industry is $68 billion, which is, far bigger than the outdoor industry is, even though everyone likes to say, oh, it's $1 trillion. It's no,
Yeah,
it's not. Um, so it like makes me feel like hopeful that, you know, these people that have survived for this long and, whatever, given an opportunity to increase their volume and production, that they'll be able to, and that we have this like great basis for an industry that I think is set to grow given the right conditions.
You know what's so interesting is that you and I sound like we're two sides of the same coin with how we sell our product. I often say I don't really care about the textiles. Like the textiles are not my priority.
Yeah.
You've all these behind me. I care that they're good quality, but for me, it's almost a non-starter. I know that the textiles I'm selling you are good quality. They're some of the best in the world.
Yeah.
I care much more about talking about the factory and where it's made and who's making it and how. And on your social media, you're talking so much about the textiles and not obviously not to say either one is better or worse or right or wrong, but it is so interesting that when you get down on this level, it does feel like one of those is enough to be all consuming. I'm so focused on the factories and who's going to make it and how this is done and who has the skill, the laborers who are skilled in making garments. I know that, like Gambert in New Jersey, they're not going to make knit polos because they're like, absolutely not. We don't want
Yeah.
that fabric in our
Mhm.
factory. They say we're not touching that. And then there's Adrian Jules in Rochester. They make clothing, tailored clothing. Same thing. They're like knit is no, none of this
Yeah.
nonsense. Like we're not doing any of this athleisure. So textiles is its own thing to tackle. Who is going to work with certain textiles? And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what So Chill in Chicago works with. She finds out the product that you want to make and says these are the factories that'll work with you based on that. Did you like where did you say that you're just a rock climber, you weren't into fashion, but like it takes a certain person to get into textiles. Like how even that word, you go out,
Yeah.
you go outside and you talk to some random person at a coffee shop about their textiles they're wearing, they're not gonna care.
Yeah, they have no idea. They don't know
Yeah,
what their shirt's made out of. But
exactly.
you're such a guru too about textiles. Like, how did you like start to geek out on fabrics,
Right.
basically?
You don't fall into
Yeah.
textiles.
Or maybe you do.
Um,
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think like that for us, that's really the basis of like our, oftentimes we'll take, I'll find fabric that is interesting and has the qualities that we want, and then, base a design around that. Because it really is like the performance characteristic of the material that is super important to us. So like we're always looking for um, things that are the lightest and strongest, right? Because we're trying to like eliminate the amount of weight that we're carrying. So the less stuff you carry, the faster you go. And so, yeah, that's kind of what pushed me to get more interested in the textile side of things is like, how can we just make this better so that we have a better product that's more functional that, hopefully people buy.
Yeah.
And then through that, I mean, I just had to learn about everything. And,
Yeah.
like we've done everything from developing our own yarns, so like own fabrics from like finding the fiber supplier and then getting yarns made and getting things, knit, dyed, finished, all that sort of stuff. So
Wow.
I feel like to really understand to do that, you need to at least have a decent understanding of all the components that go into it. And so, yeah, it's just for me, it was just a lot of reading and talking to people and trying to figure it out. But again, like I think on the textile side, like I think I think you're right. Like our I care. I mean, I care about where the fabrics we use come from and everything. So I guess like you were saying like the textile side is important, but I think in terms of like advancing reshoring and whatever, that we should be focusing on the cut and sew side of things because there's a lot less capacity in the US for that.
Yeah.
And once more of that is here, there will be more fabric material production because the demand will be there. Um, so where we run into issues a lot is on the more like really technical stuff, like you know, woven fabrics made with like 20 denier nylon stuff. Like anything super fine is really hard to get made here because the equipment just doesn't exist. So I think like for us, it's like 80% of our materials are US sourced and 20% come from either Taiwan or Japan because there's just no options.
Yeah.
No other option that we know of anyway that we've been able to find.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say like that. Um, oh my god, I feel like there's like constantly 10 questions floating in my head. I guess I have a feeling like I know what Melissa's gonna ask, so I'll leave that one. I
No,
do,
you don't.
I do want to ask though, you were saying that we're always looking for. Can you expand on that a little bit more? Are you being proactive or reactive? Like, do you sell a jacket, then look at it a season later and say, how do we make it lighter? How do we make it this? Do we change the fabric? Or are you thinking, we have these products, now I want to make that product and we need the material in order to make it? Like, what percentage, I guess, lies, because I'm assuming it's a little bit of both. What percentage lies in each of those?
Yeah, I mean, definitely both. I would say we have we have like a core part of our line that, doesn't really change or hasn't really changed. We're looking at updating a couple fabrics on a couple different products, but it's not like a super big priority for us right now. So most of, because things are selling well and the fabric's still available and we know it works and all that. So we're not trying to like change things every season for
Yeah.
sure. Um, but yeah, in terms of like, I mean, I have in my mind a whole lot of fabrics that I would like to develop, but obviously that's super expensive because you're, you know, having to meet yarn minimums and all that sort of stuff is kind of a nightmare. Um, but yeah, I mean, sometimes even just going to like functional fabric fair and walking around and meeting some of the mills, and you're like, whoa, you can actually do that. That's that's amazing. Like, and I get an idea of what kind of capacity, and what kind of capabilities these places have, and then that always like I don't know, it was awesome. I don't know, have you ever been to like a dye house or a knitting mill? Um, it's it's pretty amazing. Like I really enjoyed going down to Antex in Los Angeles. They're like a huge knit producer. I think they have capacity to do like 1 million yards a week or something like that. They've got like
Wow.
300 circular knitting machines and a huge dye house. And it's all like, oh, it's like one block of downtown Los Angeles is like all that. So it's incredible
Wow.
that you can like in California, the place with like the most stringent environmental regulations on the planet that you can make fabric right in downtown Los Angeles and sell it
Right? There you go.
cost competitively. Like,
There's hope.
yeah, it's wild.
That's pretty crazy. Well, so I actually didn't have a question. I wanted to just shout out you and some of the things you're doing because I went exploring on your website, and part of what even just got me following you in the first place was a video you did that was showcasing literally where each component for one of your products came from. And you just so about transparency. And I think that's something that is so lost in today's seller market or retailer market. And so I as I kind of went through the site, not only do you have you're showing, origins of the fabrication, where the threads come from, where it gets sewn, where it's distributed from. So there's no question in the buyer's mind who was touching this product and where everything came from. And it was fascinating to kind of deep dive a little bit and really even like I know we have a big problem in today's society that people don't read, but I went reading a lot about you and about the people who work for you, and I read about Lupe who is a sewer for you. Like I was just so like as a sewing professional myself, I just was like, oh, this just gets me going, and it makes me want to purchase from you because I feel so much more informed and I feel that much closer to your brand because of what you put out so very plainly and unabashedly about your products and about who's touching your products.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what we want. Definitely like people to get it, and I think a lot of people do. They're like, oh, like, and then but also to get people to think about like where just generally where the products that they buy come from. And like, I don't know, if I go to like a competitor's website or another outdoor apparel brand or whatever, and they don't even have like country of origin on their site, like that's a
It's
red flag to me.
Oh, it's wild. I can't tell you how many times now in the last several years I'll go wanting to purchase something and I will just look for content. What's it made out of? What's the percentage? Like, and I can't even, you have to dig sometimes. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's, yeah, major red flag, or like you said, country of origin. I'm just trying to make a better informed decision. And if you're hiding it from me, I'm probably not shopping from you anyway at this point. But
Yeah.
I think it's such a nice precedent that you set to put it all out there in the open. And I think that it's something that other companies should follow suit with so, so deeply.
Yeah.
I agree.
The I feel like this is the natural segue
I know where we're going.
into the tariffs.
Dun dun dun.
Oh
And
God.
yep, you and I have talked about it a little bit. I believe you made a reel or a story about it. I know I made a reel about it. And we talked about how there needs to be infrastructure here. And like you said, you import materials not because it's cheaper, but because they don't exist here. Same
Yeah.
thing with me. I import materials not because it's cheaper, I want to do this, but because they don't exist here. Or as a uh uh a product-based company, I need options. I can't just if I could be a successful company only selling American woolen, I would. But you
Yeah.
need to be competitive in this industry, you need to have all of these options. And those don't exist here. And the linings and the buttons and the whatever else. And I don't, you can answer if you like the tariffs or not. That's not really what I'm interested in. I'm more interested in this idea of how the tariffs have kind of shaken us out of this kind of catatonic. We all just think fairies drop it off in the night,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there is a supply chain. Like
Yeah.
things need parts to get
Yeah.
made. And yes, we all want it. I don't care how you voted. We all want more jobs here. We all want a better life here. But there are certain actions that are counter to the reality, which is tariffs on imported goods hurt American jobs because my job is now more expensive because I have to import like it's a vicious circle. So what's it like been with you? You know, you're lucky that you've got some of your products made domestically, but some are imported. So how has it affected your company overall? Are your domestic products outselling your imported products? Like, or materials? Like, what does that all look like for your landscape?
Yeah. I guess I could start by
Yeah,
um
answer one of those 17
yeah,
questions.
yeah. Um by saying that, like, I think the way this was done is really stupid and counterproductive to,
Yes.
the stated intent for
Yeah.
what they're trying to do. Like, we basically, I mean, this is the second time in 5 years that there's been, like, a supply shock like this, and the first time was COVID, and now this is, like, completely self-made. But it's the same thing, right? Like, boats have stopped, like, stuff's not moving, like, the supply chain is, um, is shut down, so, um, I think that, like, if they were doing this with the intent of bringing back manufacturing is, like, the worst way that you could possibly do it, because I lived through owning a factory during COVID and it was fucking horrible. Like, they're basically doing the same thing now, but probably even in a worse way because, like, we can't even, you know, like, every sewing machine, with the exception of Miro, comes from Japan, China, or Germany, all of which now have tariffs on them. It's like you can't tariff the production equipment that you want, like,
Right.
that you want the factories to open. Like, no one's starting a sewing
Right.
machine factory tomorrow to start making, like, Juki knockoffs in
Yeah.
Tennessee or something like that. Like,
That would be pretty funny though.
it would. I, um, but yeah, so yeah, poorly done, definitely. The universal thing doesn't make sense. Like, if you wanted to do it, you would have an actual plan that was bipartisan supported, that you could and I was calling for this in 2020, like, when, post whatever, imports coming back and everybody was shutting down. I was like, this is really bad because
Yeah.
now, like, everybody that could respond to, like, the COVID PPE stuff did, and it was, good, and then it was really bad for everybody. And now it's like, I don't know, I think you can kind of see it now, like, as more inquiries and people are talking about bringing things back here. I think there's going to be some hesitation among, uh, factories who were affected by the COVID stuff and all that. So,
Sure.
yeah, I don't know. This universal tariffs, not smart. Um, could have been done a lot better. De
Sure.
minimis loophole closing, awesome. Super psyched about that. I think um, that's been a big one that makes sense and definitely has bipartisan support. So, um, I think that's been good. Everything else, not great. Don't know what's gonna happen, but
Yeah.
we'll see. I mean, there are, like, we have been getting a lot of inquiries from people talking about bringing production back or starting to look into it and all that. But again, like, with all the uncertainty, who knows
Yeah.
what's actually gonna happen.
Do you find so because you are still importing some of your materials, the countries that you're importing from, do you feel any sense of whiplash because of the tariffs, or have those countries been just kind of like steady at a certain percent and you're kind of got a handle on it?
We haven't had to import anything recently, so we have pretty good stock of the fabrics that we do import.
Nice.
So I don't really have too much knowledge of what's happening. I was at Functional Fabric with our friends, have a company called Trenchant Textiles. They do, like, waterproof breathable laminates, and it's all done in Taiwan. And he was saying that, and this was a couple weeks ago, that their factory, like, all the Taiwan factories are just, like, idled at this point. Like, they're just,
Wow.
like, waiting pretty much. So yeah, I don't know. It's
That's
weird times.
crazy. Yeah, it is. It's It's a shame to feel the sense of uncertainty on such a grand scale, and it really does seem like nobody is unaffected.
Yeah, no, everybody's going to be. And I mean, my main concerns like mostly revolve around consumer spending and what's going to happen. Um, so there's going to be more layoffs and job loss and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff. And I know consumer sentiment's already kind of in the toilet. So, well,
But
that's
people are gonna need to be spending a lot of time outdoors
that's
very
true.
soon. We're
Yeah.
gonna
And
need to go touch some grass.
that's what I always come back to. Like climbing for a sport has been around since arguably the first ascent of Mont Blanc in 1789. So it's a lot of, a lot's happened in 250 years or whatever that is. And I think like people always will go outside and seek solace and
Yeah.
all that. And we'll need the gear to be able to do that.
Yeah. I also thought it was really cool, just as a little side note from what we were just speaking about, that I noticed on your site that you talk about care for your products. And I thought it was actually very cool that there are a couple segments where you're like, you know, don't use heat, don't put it in the dryer at all. But then also there's this other product where sometimes the thought is to use heat and reseal it. And you even put in parentheses, I know that's the opposite of what we just told you. Like, so there was such a great character to the narration of the care instructions. But I also found it just really insightful that you're obviously encouraging everyone, take care of your stuff in the best way possible. Wash it as little as you can in these certain types of products for X, Y, and Z reason, and then repair it. Do this. I think you even said like duct tape it, like do whatever. And I just, there's so much at the core that Matt and I talk about with care and repair and longevity and just purchasing products that you believe in that have the intention to last. And if God forbid something happens to them, that you have skilled hands to fix them and just the knowledge to care for them as best as you possibly can. So I have to commend you too for putting all of that out there and being so like having that be so top of mind with everything that you do in your business.
Yeah, it's super important to us. And I mean, I love like seeing pictures. I mean, people are still wearing like the original Black Spider hoodies that we made in 2010.
So cool.
They're still in use 15 years later. And, I love getting back, we'll get stuff back for repair, that's 10, 12, whatever years old. And like, I love being able to just put into pocket on it and be like,
Yep.
here, use it for another 10 years. Like,
Yeah, you have to
That's
feel like
awesome.
that. I remember
Right?
yeah.
that I think that was the reel that I was just like, "Oh shit, like, these are people I want to know more about," and, like, 'cause it was like a red jacket and you had the weird pointer finger thing.
The pointer finger.
And you were like, "Oh, yeah, see, Lupe put this pocket on and 15 years ago, and now she's putting it, redoing it." And I was just like, "That's so cool," because something that's come up, Melissa and I have talked about this with other people, is that, yeah, okay, we have our job. We do what we do. You sell climbing gear. Melissa hems dresses. I sell custom clothing. But there's the bigger grand narrative that we're pushing. And it's the story of garment workers here in America. It's the need to mend your clothing and care for it and get people back to stitching. And then for you, you alluded to it a little bit before, but like, what is the agenda? What is what gets you out of bed? What is what drives your decisions when launching this company to partnering with other people, with aligning yourself with other companies? Like, what's the narrative that you're getting into?
I mean, I think I really like believe that globalization and what's happened to our economy over the last 30 years has been net negative for the vast majority of Americans. And the decimation of manufacturing has had profound impacts on our communities. And um, you know, that this idea that uh those like cheap goods are like a right that we have as Americans or something. It's just bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, so really, I think that like I saw it owning our factory and paying, we paid millions of dollars in wages over the years, like directly into these communities and what kind of impact that has, compared to if I was importing, things from China or whatever and then reselling them. Sure, like I probably would have made more money, but at, then like what happens to all those people when you get rid of the manufacturing? And I think that's what we've seen. Like, our largest employers are Walmart, Home Depot, Target, Amazon. Like, they're people that are stocking shelves with goods that are made overseas, and instead of being a part of that value chain and adding value to the product, and making more money doing that, and
Yep.
um, being this expense line on Jeff Bezos's uh, P&L or whatever. Like, I think, um, yeah, I mean, I just think that if you want to make change, this is how you do it. Um, you know, and providing good jobs and I don't know, probably like one of the most disappointing things I see coming out of like the discussion now is people being like, well, we don't want sweatshops in the US, and this idea
Yeah.
of like what garment workers do and what, factory work is like, and all that. And you're like, no, it's actually pretty awesome. Like, have you ever been in a factory
Yeah.
and seen like what happens there? Like, it's magical. So
Yeah.
The
um
skills that it takes someone to make something with two hands and a machine
yeah.
is unbelievable. Like Matt knows like I'll go all crazy, but it moves me to tears that like anytime someone acknowledges someone who crafted something, because that is such a rarity, that's why it's so like profound for me. And then
Mm.
being in that profession myself, there is no greater joy and reward. And it doesn't have to be just the sewing trades, it's just anything else that you build, that you make, that you like. There's something to the art of craftsmanship that has gotten so lost and has gotten so looked down upon. And I don't know when that became, obviously it was a slow moving thing, but I don't know at what point we tipped that scale so far that, it's a blue collar job, it's less than, it's what we didn't want our kids to go to trade school. They have to go to college and get some piece of paper. And it's just shot us in the foot at this point. And to your point when you said about, it's our right to have people want to say it's their right to have these cheap goods. I want the opposite. I want the right to own a bunch of luxury shit, man. Like I want to live a good life and have a good earnings income. Like I don't even mind making those good products myself. Do you know what I mean? Like there's something to be said for Matt and I talk about this all the time, the slowdown, the appreciation, the getting back to center, you know, not looking down on someone for using their hands and working, we'll call it, let's say, a dirty job. These aren't even dirty jobs anymore. Like this is just humble work that people
Yeah.
should be inspired by. And it's such a shame that it gets so lost. Um, to that end, what are your, and I don't even mean like pie in the sky hopes, like what are some like realistic things that you could see as a positive change coming down the pipeline?
Ooh.
And scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
This interview's over.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
I don't know. I would like to see really like for me, like the domestic manufacturing piece always comes down to is demand. Right? Like you can build as many factories as you want if you have like subsidies to do it and whatever, but it doesn't matter if there's no demand for the products that that factory makes. So figuring out how to like increase the demand for US made products, I think is the first key. Because without it, it doesn't make sense to like invest in factories and and do all of that. But you see like when And I mean, because I experienced it, did it myself. Like when the demand is there, you can build capacity to to do that. And when we did it at our factory, we started with 4 people, and then ended at the peak having 75. And that whole like process of scaling, I was able to do through cash flow and retained earnings and all of that. So I think there's this idea that like if manufacturing is going to come back, it's got to be like subsidized and all of that. And I think that no, we can just do it. Like we just need the demand there. So how can we drive more demand from the end user for US made products? And like on the outdoor side, I think that can be done. Um, it's a little different because it's small and it's niche, but through like we have a lot of independent specialty retailers, so like smaller outdoor stores that have faced a lot of competition from REI and some of the big online sellers. And getting them on board, because they sell about $1 to $1.5 billion worth of outdoor apparel every year, and that's a lot of demand. That's a big, that's a like a big chunk of business that I think, getting enough of those types of retailers on board could be really good. And then, I'm talking to other brands now. It's like you're trying to compete as a brand making things in China or Vietnam or whatever. You're small. You're trying to compete against Patagonia, who has basically unlimited cash to do whatever they want to do.
Yep.
And then you're trying to compete against the North Face and some publicly traded companies and all of that. And it's just a losing deal. Like you're never going to get the economies of scale that they have. And so you're just kind of trying to play the same game that they're playing. And I think that needs to change. I think there's a way that we can utilize our short domestic supply chains to produce closer to supply, to produce supply closer to what demand actually is, so that we're not doing like, you know, closeouts. Like every outdoor brand's like 50% off right now and has been for like a year and a half, which is just killing everything. So yeah, figuring out a way to utilize the domestic supply chain to produce closer to demand. And um there's a real sustainability story there
I
also,
was gonna
because
say that. I
yeah,
was gonna say, you know what's nice
totally.
about that? A whole lot less
Uh-huh.
waste. Like,
Exactly. So much less waste in transportation, all of it. It just makes sense. And for like the industry that's supposed to be like, super environmentally friendly and concerned about sustainability, uh, you know, but then your biggest brand that talks about that goes and produces $1.5 billion worth of apparel in Vietnam and Sri Lanka.
nope. There
And
you go.
whatever is a little bit of a head scratcher. But
Yeah.
I think there's good opportunities for small brands producing here to make a difference.
I think that that is so you hit the nail on the head. And it's something that I've been talking about with people, which is okay, let's take the tariff talk, let's take the, demand talk. What's the end goal? Is the end goal to have American output rival that of the overseas output? Because that is never going to happen,
Oh, nor should it.
nor should it. So that piece, I feel like we know it being on this side of the industry. The public needs to know that. The consumer needs to know that it is not normal to go through 25 hoodies a year. It is not
Yeah,
normal to buy a dress, not wear it because it didn't match the shoes and throw it away. That is not
yeah,
normal. You should not have those options available. So,
it's insane.
normal is less and better. Normal is making products that can be mended and cared for over time. The second conversation I have with every single client who buys something from me, how do I dry clean it? How do I take care of it? I just got a text this morning. A guy walked away with his suit last week and he's about to travel, and his he was like, how do I pack it? How do I take care of it? They don't, it's been lost on us how to care for clothing because it's just so cheap and replaceable. And so that piece of the discussion, I do applaud you for. I feel validated in like, okay, good. We're on the same page. Like if other people and other manufacturers and other sellers are thinking the same thing, we can have a similar marketing approach to you don't need all of this. You don't need buy one, get four free. You don't need any of that. You need one good thing. And then later down the road, what's the next good thing? I remember I was going on a ski trip a couple months ago and I reached out to you and was like, I need a jacket and I didn't know what to get. And I think it was a quick turnaround or something. And I just didn't pull the trigger. And I
Yeah.
ended up borrowing a friend's jacket and that was fine. And I'm
Yeah.
okay with it. And next year I will be ready. Now that I know, okay, this is what I need. I needed it last year and I'll get it ahead of time. And it's like, that's normal. I'm not going to run to Target, buy some random puffer, throw it, wear it once, throw it away. Like, no,
Yeah.
it does. And Melissa and I have talked about it several times, which is the difficulty is it's not policy, it's not jobs, it's consumer behavior that needs to change. How
Yeah.
how do we get into
How
the
do you affect it? Yeah.
how do we get into the zeitgeist where people just say, okay, luxury did it when people thought this is normal. Let's buy $1,500 polos from Laura Piana. The
Yeah.
breweries did it when they opened up and everybody wanted to go to breweries. How do we get that Gladwellian tipping point of, okay, this is now the new normal?
Yeah, it's so hard because of what the status quo is now and like how far the pendulum has swung away from um, those ideals. And I think like I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
how we do that. Because it's such like a big thing. And what's gonna happen in the next few weeks is like shelves start to, you know, we start to run out of products,
Empty.
certain
Mhm.
products in stores. Now people can't order or they're getting like $100 charges on their Shein or Temu orders or whatever. Like, then I think, we're really going to see w- how people, how the vast majority of people are going to react in the next few
Right.
weeks. So it'll be interesting. And like, is there like this how ingrained is this entitlement that like $5 dresses are like my right? And
Yeah.
um if that makes sense. But this whole
Yeah.
system, like I feel the entire like global garment production manufacturing ecosystem is just an abject failure on like all levels, really. Like if you look at, there was that um you know uh factoid that came out a few years ago that was like there's that we currently have like enough clothes for the next six
Six
generations on this
generations.
planet.
Yep.
That's fucking insane. That is like a pure market failure.
Yeah.
Like it and goes into all of the subsidies and like everything that is propelling that forward to be able to happen. Like that could happen is insane.
I
Nope.
think,
Like
to that end also, the barrier to entry into this industry is non-existent. You could just decide, I want to start an apparel company, find a manufacturer overseas and start doing it. There's no
yeah,
insight into who else is doing it. So you don't know that a billion other people are also doing it. And all of
yeah,
them are sending planes all over the place. So there's none of those people are going to look into the textiles and what should get made and how it should get made. All you could say is, I just want to make things look cool and do it and give these people money and do it. The other
yeah,
aspect of this is that we are now so far removed from the 90s, which was the end of us having an infrastructure. So let's say the 60s, for example, we're so far removed from that where we understand who makes our clothing, what it's made of, why it costs so much.
Right.
And I work on the side for my garment manufacturer, and I field calls from people now who are like, "Oh, I'm making clothing in China and it just got a little bit more expensive. So now I'm wondering, is it better to make it here?" And I'm like, "Well, okay, so what are you making a suit in China for?" And they're like, "Well, they just raised the prices to like $200, so I'm gonna have to sell this suit for like $700." And I'm like, that's below my cost to make a
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
profiting on. And they're like, "Oh my God, are you serious?" The distance of knowledge, the gap of understanding what it takes to make clothing overseas versus what it takes to make clothing here is so vast. That chasm is what worries me. It's like, how do we tip people back into understanding that it's normal? And I'm at the peak, I'm at the top, I'm at the luxury, but also
Yeah.
it's so rare to find luxury clothing made in America that people see me as the rule. And they're like, "Well,
Yeah.
not everybody needs a $3,300 suit." And I'm like, "You're right. And I don't want to
Right.
only sell one. I want more. I want
Right.
demand, and it'll drive my prices down." Like I
Well,
would
Yeah.
but and you
facilitate.
can also then find the Bills of the world or the Jakes and these other folks who are doing things at a what I would consider a reasonable cost. No offense, Matt. Like,
Yes,
but
exactly.
but something that is more palatable to the general public. And I think
Yes.
when we're talking about, well, what's it going to take to end this disconnection, it's going to be hit them in the wallet. Like, and none of
Yeah.
us want to go through that. And it's going to suck, quite frankly. But when your Shein thing was $5 and goes to 100, and you're like, well, that's not worth it. Well, it wasn't worth it to begin with, but okay.
Yeah.
Like, if that's what gets you to not push buy now, then so be it. So I think there has to be like just there's got to be so many levels, unfortunately, of things at play. But definitely when you start touching people's money, that's when people get a little bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I think we're in kind of like a interesting place in the outdoor industry, like from a pricing perspective, because the big brands, the biggest brands have been just jacking their prices up since COVID pretty much. So to the point now where like our margins are fine and we're selling stuff for comparable to what they are, or sometimes even a little less. Um, so I was thinking about that. Like, are
Yeah.
they really shooting for like 90% margins on their wholesale? Like, that's crazy. Wild, but all right.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. And
so
that's what
yeah,
happened this whole time, right? Is when we talk about like, well, how did this start? How do we get so far gone? And I don't mean to be the one who's like being like, I know I'm not anti-capitalism, but people chase the money, people chase the
yeah,
profit. So we didn't necessarily know we wanted cheaper goods. They just started coming to us and we all went, wow, we like this. And there's that mentality of keeping up with the Joneses and whatever and buying more so you have more and therefore you're defined, you know, as being better than or having the things. And we got sucked into a hole. And we kind of all got played for fools, really, as the consumer. And we just went along for the ride, not really knowing any better. And I think that people are smartening up. And so luckily, hopefully there'll be a shift in the tides there. Matt and I've talked about the shift in to secondhand clothing and, stuff with vintage and this stuff that's gaining popularity because we're all just so exhausted from the hamster wheel that is retail consumption. It's brutal.
absolutely. I think you know, it's hard to define, but I was thinking about like how really what's happening now isn't actually like capitalism because we're buying stuff from China, which is um you know, this has this giant like state capitalist system that's really just communist, basically. Where so everything that the insane thing to me is that we had this big Cold War for however long that ended, and then almost immediately we decided that okay, actually, we think the communist system is going to be better for producing the products that our society needs to function. So we're gonna move all of this to China, which is like the most
Right.
insane the most insane thing I've ever heard. And then so all of these companies have been benefiting from that. Like they're, the prices coming out of China are not in any way related to reality, right? Like I think that because everything is subsidized from the prices that manufacturers pay for power to oil and raw materials, everything is affected by that. And so we have this entirely, and that's how you can end up with 6 generations worth of clothes, right? Because no one's
Right.
paying the actual price for those things, because if they
Right.
were, they would be bankrupt.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So in some ways it's like getting back to like real capitalism and market
Yeah.
competition dynamics
Correct.
is what's gonna like save us, I think. And I think like you need a market system that has like, in this tiny system, it's like, okay, like we need to maintain full employment. So our demand signal is going to be set at full production all the time because we want to keep people employed. It doesn't matter if we have buyer for these or not. And then it goes
Right.
to like the demand side, or it's like, okay,
Right.
but now you're flooding the market with like a bunch of stuff
Right.
that nobody actually wants to buy. So what's like the actual clearing price of that
Yeah.
product? And it's
Exactly.
actually, there is no clearing price. So how much of that's actually getting thrown away? And,
Ugh.
all of that's like an environmental disaster, a labor disaster, just like a general disaster.
It's
But
brutal.
people are like, "But I paid 70 cents for this, from China," like,
Right. Like it's a
and you
victory.
wanna charge me, like, $50 to make it here. It's like, yeah,
Exactly.
because there's an actual cost
Yep.
for these things that's
Yes.
not being borne by anybody but you.
Yeah. It's funny. One of my really good friends, she and I get in fights all the time because I'm like, "Oh yeah, all my products made in America." And I tell her, I'm like, "I those shirts that are like I heart New York? I want one that says I heart capitalism because I do the system, but I
Right.
also it is like killing me." And she's like, "You don't love capitalism." And I was like, I feel like you don't know what capitalism is, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I do. But I'm so glad to hear that, Bill, from your perspective, this isn't what capitalism is. I feel
Right.
in it because it's yeah, you're right. It's like that capitalistic society and like making things here and that free trade. Yes, that can work to our advantage, but it's just we've gotten to this bastardized version and the worst form of what everybody can do if you take advantage of every loophole. It's
Yeah.
like Jesus Christ,
Right.
this is not it. We want to talk about making
Right.
things like pridefully here in America.
Yeah.
Let's get back to that. The pride, not just
Right.
Yeah.
how to skim out every single
Yeah.
little piece.
Pride over
Uh-huh.
exploitation.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, this whole I don't know. Yeah, the whole business culture and corporate culture, I think, is just completely rotten to the
Yeah.
core. And it's all about middlemaning and labor arbitrage and whatever. It's been very awesome for Wall Street and for multinationals and mega corporations and 1%, and then it's been terrible for everybody else pretty much. So I think like um yeah, the idea that why can't we have an actual capitalist system where there's actual competition instead of like two companies that hoard the majority of the profits and the industry
Yeah.
and all of that. So bringing
Yeah.
competition back is
Yep.
is what I would like to see.
I think that is a beautiful spot to wrap up because we're in the middle of your workday. You're on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
Plus,
You
my
Yeah, you
neck
guys
hurts
have
from bobbleheading on just agreeing
yeah.
so dramatically with all
Yeah,
of
I
this
can.
conversation. I'm like, okay, now my head hurts. We're good.
Yes, yes. Bill, is there anything you'd like last minute tidbit you'd like to add? And also where can people find you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if any of this is interesting to people, definitely follow me on LinkedIn, just Bill Amos. I post some hot takes there. And then check out our website, nwalpine.com. Follow us on Instagram and NW Alpine Gear. And then yeah, That's all I got. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
No, this was a
Thank you.
huge win. When it was funny because Melissa told me, she was like, yeah, so I talked to Northwest Alpine. I was like, what you did? I was like, behind my back, and I was like, I thought he was my
Awesome.
guy. Like, so it's funny because we both have just like tried to get to you first. So this was
Well, and then Matt walks in today and he's just like, blah, blah, blah. And I was talking to Bill and I'm like, Northwest Alpine, Bill?
yeah.
He's
I
like,
was
yeah.
like,
I'm like,
"Can't
I didn't
throw
know
that
you two
out there."
talked. Like, we're just fighting over you, Bill. It's fine.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you, and best of luck. Your gear looks amazing, and the social media angle you guys do is just brilliant. I low key try to like copy it.
Thank
I'll
you.
give you that.
Shout out to
Cat's out of the
Caleb. He
bag.
does a great job.
Caleb is
Oh, that's
awesome.
awesome.
And yeah, I love Caleb. He's an avid follower of mine who we've talked a couple times in the DM. So I really appreciate him and you. So thank you, Bill, so much for taking the time to talk to us. And thank you to the listener for tuning in to another episode of The Fabric of America.